The moment Simone hit the floor, the room exploded. Sophia Whitmore had stuck her leg out just as Simone walked past. Simone stumbled, her heel caught the marble, and a full glass of red wine splashed across her white gown. The stains spread instantly, like blood on snow. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Phones came out. Guests leaned over to record what they thought was the funniest moment of the night. Careful, she might break something valuable. Margaret Whitmore's voice sliced through the air, dripping with arrogance. She raised her glass, as if mocking a toast. Brandon, already tipsy, shouted, "This is gold. She's going viral tonight." His phone stayed locked on Simone, recording every second of her pain. Sophia smirked from across the room. "She's probably looking for the broom closet," she said, her friends giggling behind her. Simone tried to stand, hands bruised, gown dripping, but the humiliation was worse than the fall. She looked around. Hundreds of faces, some laughing, some whispering, all watching. Not one hand reached to help her. Margaret snapped again, louder this time. "Security, get this disaster out of here. People like this don't belong in our world." Laughter erupted once more. Phones kept filming. Every insult, every cruel word was being captured, ready to be posted and shared with millions. To them, Simone was nothing, an outsider, a joke, someone beneath them. But Simone didn't shout. She didn't beg. She just gripped her phone tightly, her eyes steady, cold, unshaken. Because while everyone in that room believed they had humiliated a nobody, the truth was about to destroy them. They thought she was nothing, but they had just mocked the one person who owned their future. They thought they had embarrassed a nobody. The truth? That nobody was Simone Richardson, one of the most powerful CEOs in America. Net worth? $57 billion. Billion, not million. Her company, Richardson Global, was a giant. Real estate, technology, manufacturing. She owned towers in New York, hotels in Los Angeles, factories in Chicago. She had partnerships with Fortune 500 companies and more than 100,000 people on her payroll. And the most important detail? She didn't inherit a single cent. Simone built it all, from scratch. She grew up with nothing, raised by her grandmother in a tiny apartment, where rent was always late and food was sometimes missing from the table. She knew what rejection felt like. She knew what it meant to walk into a room and be told she didn't belong. People underestimated her, doubted her, laughed at her. But every insult, every closed door became fuel. She turned humiliation into hunger. She turned no into watch me. And she climbed, year after year, deal after deal. She built Richardson Global into an empire worth more than the families mocking her that night could even imagine. So when Margaret called her nothing, and Brandon laughed like she was a joke, the irony was unreal. The woman they treated as an outsider wasn't beneath them. She was far above them, more powerful than everyone in that ballroom combined. And what makes this even crazier? The Whitmore family, the same family laughing at her humiliation, had no idea that their company's survival was tied to her name. And the family mocking her? Their survival depended on her signature. While Simone was being mocked on the floor, here's the truth nobody in that room knew. The Whitmore family, the hosts of this glamorous gala, were broke. Charles Whitmore, the proud patriarch, liked to act like old money royalty. But behind the tailored suits and the fake smile, his empire was collapsing. He had inherited billions in real estate. Towers, hotels, offices. His father built it, his grandfather expanded it. But Charles? He was losing it all. Bad decisions, failed investments, massive debts. Whitmore Industries was bankrupt, though the world didn't know it yet. And tonight's gala wasn't just about charity. It was cover, a distraction. The one night they planned to announce the only thing that could save them. a $1.2 billion merger with Richardson Global. Margaret Whitmore, his wife, was even worse. She lived for appearances. Her entire identity was being above everyone else. Every insult, every cruel smirk, every word dripping with superiority. That was her armor. She needed people to feel smaller so she could feel bigger. And losing her status? That terrified her more than losing money. Then there was Brandon, their son, spoiled to the core. He had failed at every business venture Charles bought him. He drank, he partied, he laughed at other people's pain because it was the only thing that made him feel important. A liability in expensive clothes. And Sophia, the daughter, charming, beautiful, and ruthless. Humiliation wasn't a mistake for her. It was sport. She loved it. Tonight, when she tripped Simone, that wasn't an accident. That was her entertainment. But here's the twist. None of them knew the truth about the woman they had mocked. The deal that could save them. The signature they were desperate for. And the only person who could save them was the one they had just destroyed. Simone's nightmare didn't actually start on the marble floor. It started before she even got through the door. When she arrived at the Whitmore gala, dressed in her custom white gown, the valet didn't even look at her properly. He pointed toward the back alley and said, "Service entrance is that way." Just like that. As if a woman in a gown like hers could only be there to clean. Simone kept her calm. She walked to the main entrance with her invitation in hand. And that's where the real humiliation began. The security guard, Jake, took one look at her and his smile disappeared. He checked her invitation like it was fake. He ran his finger down the guest list again and again, pretending her name wasn't there. When she showed her ID, he held it up to the light, squinting, stalling, even pulling out a flashlight. All the while, other guests walked right in, barely showing their invites. Some didn't even bother, and still, he waved them through. But Simone? She was forced to wait. Outside, in the cold. 5 minutes turned into 20. 20 into 40. By the end, Simone had stood outside for almost 2 hours. Her heels aching, her hair ruined by the wind, her body shivering in the October chill. Guests passed by laughing, whispering, shaking their heads like she didn't belong. Through the glass doors, she saw Jake chatting with other staff, laughing, not checking anything. He was stalling her on purpose. He wanted her to give up and leave. Finally, he returned her ID and waved her in. 2 hours late. Humiliated before the night had even begun. She thought the worst was over. But the real cruelty was waiting inside. When Simone finally walked into the ballroom, she thought the humiliation at the door was behind her. She was wrong. The moment Margaret Whitmore spotted her, her voice rang out across the room. "Oh my God, how did the maid get in here?" Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The laughter started again. Charles shook his head in disgust. "This is a charity gala, not a job fair. Security really failed us tonight." Brandon, already drunk, lifted his phone higher, recording her every step. "Perfect timing," he slurred. "The bathrooms could use cleaning." His friends roared with laughter, clinking glasses like it was the best joke of the night. Sophia smirked from across the hall, her voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Someone point her to the broom closet before she gets lost." Her friends giggled on cue. Simone tried to ignore them. She walked toward the bar, desperate for a glass of water after standing outside for hours. The bartender looked at Margaret for approval. Margaret shook her head instantly. "No drinks for the help. She doesn't deserve even water from our glasses." The crowd laughed harder. When Simone moved toward a chair to sit, Margaret blocked her path again. "Those seats are for our guests, not whatever you are." So Simone stood, in the corner, silent, surrounded by laughter, whispers, and phones recording her humiliation like she was part of the night's entertainment. Every cruel word, Every insult was treated as comedy. But what nobody noticed was Simone's hand tightening around her phone. And that's when Simone finally picked up her phone. The laughter was still echoing when Simone finally raised her phone to her ear. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "James," she said. "It's Simone. Cancel everything." The room didn't notice at first. Brandon was still replaying his video. Sophia was smirking with her friends. Margaret was bragging to late arrivals about how she had put the maid in her place. But a few guests standing close enough heard the words. Their smiles froze. Cancel? Everything? On the other end of the line, James from Richardson Global's legal team sounded confused. "Ma'am, the Whitmore contracts are ready for your signature tonight. Do you want me to hold them?" "No," Simone cut in, her voice sharp. "Not hold. Cancel. Every contract. Every deal. Every partnership. The entire $1.2 billion merger. Burn it all." There was silence on the other end. Then James asked carefully, "Should I redirect the funds to the minority business program instead?" "Yes. All of it. I want every penny invested in Black-owned businesses, Latino entrepreneurs, Asian American startups, Native American companies. People who actually deserve it." Now the closest guests were no longer laughing. They were staring. Did she just say billion? Did she just say merger? Whispers started spreading like fire. "Did you hear that?" She said 1.2 billion. Merger contracts? Charles Whitmore caught fragments of the conversation. His chest tightened. His glass slipped slightly in his hand. He had been waiting months for this announcement. That merger was his lifeline. The only thing standing between his empire and complete collapse. His face went pale. He shoved through the crowd, his voice cracking with desperation. He pushed through the crowd, trembling. "What did you say your name was?" Charles forced his way through the crowd until he stood right in front of her. His voice shook as he asked, What did you say your name was?" Simone lowered her phone. She looked him dead in the eyes, calm and unshaken, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all night. "Simone Richardson," she said evenly, "CEO and founder of Richardson Global Industries." The words dropped like a bomb. The laughter in the room died instantly. Brandon froze mid-recording. Sophia's smirk vanished. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Simone reached into her purse, pulled out a platinum business card, the kind that cost more than some people's rent, and handed it straight to Charles. He took it with trembling fingers, his eyes scanning the name over and over like maybe it would magically change. But it didn't. Simone Richardson, billionaire. The very woman whose signature was supposed to save his dying empire. The woman his family had just called worthless. The woman they had mocked, tripped, laughed at, and recorded for fun. Around the room, phones slowly lowered. Whispers started spreading. "She's the Richardson? The merger? Oh my God!" Simone let the silence stretch. Let them all feel the weight of what they had done. And then, with the same icy calm that had carried her through every humiliation that night, she opened her mouth again. And then she said 5 words that ended an empire. The silence in the ballroom didn't last long. Within minutes, the doors swung open. A team of Richardson Global attorneys walked in, dressed in sharp suits, carrying thick folders. They didn't smile. They didn't greet anyone. They came with one purpose: execution. The lead attorney opened a folder and began reading, her voice loud enough for every guest to hear. "Effective immediately, the Richardson-Whitmore merger agreement is canceled. All pending contracts are void. All partnerships terminated." Gasps filled the room. Guests looked at each other, confused, horrified. The attorney continued without pause. "All loans extended to Whitmore Industries are hereby called in for immediate repayment. All credit lines frozen. All lease agreements revoked. All supply chain contracts terminated. Charles stumbled back like he had been punched. Margaret grabbed his arm, whispering, "What's happening?" But Charles already knew. This wasn't a delay. This wasn't a warning. This was the end. The Whitmore empire was collapsing in real time, right in front of their friends, their business partners, their entire social circle. Phones came back up, but now not to laugh, to document history, to post the downfall of one of Manhattan's richest families. Within minutes, hashtags exploded online. Hashtag Whitmore disaster. Hashtag billion-dollar mistake. Hashtag racism costs. Donors quietly slipped out. Investors pulled away. People who had smiled at Margaret moments ago now avoided her eyes. The glamorous Whitmore name, once a symbol of power, was trending worldwide as a symbol of shame. And through it all, Simone stood calm, watching the family that had humiliated her realize they had destroyed themselves. The Whitmores weren't just humiliated, they were finished. The collapse wasn't just headlines. It became their reality. Charles Whitmore, the man who once owned half of Manhattan, was forced to declare bankruptcy. At 63, he took a desk job at a small real estate office in Queens. No limo, no penthouse, just a subway ride to a cubicle. His new salary? Less than what he used to spend on wine every month. Margaret Whitmore, the self-proclaimed queen of high society, lost everything she worshipped. Country clubs revoked her membership. Charity boards dropped her. Old friends crossed the street to avoid her. She ended up in a small apartment in New Jersey, working part-time at a department store. For the first time in her life, she had to wear a name tag. Sophia Whitmore, once the glamorous socialite, became toxic online. The video of her tripping Simone with a wine glass followed her everywhere. Employers refused to hire her. Dating apps banned her. Every time her name came up, people remembered the cruel smirk she wore while destroying another woman's dignity. And Brandon Whitmore? The spoiled son who laughed the loudest? His rant about reverse racism went viral for all the wrong reasons. No company wanted him. His trust fund was gone. At 29, he was flipping burgers at a fast food chain, living in a studio apartment, abandoned by the same friends who once partied with him. The Whitmores didn't just lose money. They lost their name, their status, their future. Generations of privilege gone in a single night. But Simone wasn't done. She had one last move, one final message that would echo far beyond that ballroom. But Simone had one final message the world would never forget. When the dust finally settled, Simone stood tall. The same woman they had laughed at, the same woman they thought was nothing. But now the entire world was listening. She looked at the broken Whitmore family and spoke calmly, every word landing like a hammer. "You called me nothing. Now you know what nothing feels like." Silence. Nobody dared to move. Nobody dared to breathe. She turned to the guests who had recorded her humiliation, to the business partners who had stood by and laughed. Respect is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And those who fail to give it pay the highest price. Her words spread far beyond that ballroom. Within hours, headlines flashed across every screen. Billionaire CEO cancels $1.2 billion deal after racial humiliation. Social media exploded. Business schools, diversity experts, journalists. Everyone repeated the same lesson. Cruelty wasn't just wrong. Cruelty was expensive. For the Whitmores, the cost was everything. Their money, their empire, their name, gone. For the world, it was a reminder. Status doesn't excuse disrespect. Power doesn't excuse cruelty. Humanity is always more valuable than hate. And for Simone, it wasn't revenge. It was justice. A statement that no matter how much money or influence someone claims to have, the moment they strip others of dignity, they sign their own downfall. That night, Simone didn't just end an empire. She started a movement, a new standard, a warning to anyone who thought arrogance and racism came without consequences. And this was just the beginning.